What if a dynasty could unify a country, rebuild its institutions, construct one of the greatest engineering projects in history, and still be remembered as a failure? That was the Sui Dynasty. It ended 300 years of division. It reunified North and South. It built the Grand Canal, a waterway that would feed the empire for 1,000 years. It created institutions the Tang Dynasty would later inherit wholesale. And yet, the Sui lasted only 37 years. In some ways, it was the most successful failure in Chinese history. But before we talk about how the Sui collapsed, let's talk about how it was built. Because its founder was an extraordinarily complex man. His name was Yan Zhen. History knows him as Emperor Wen of Sui. He did not take power through heroism on the battlefield. He took it through a coup. He took the throne from his own grandson. Picture that moment. A powerful minister sitting in the throne room watching a small child on the dragon throne. That child was his daughter's son, his own bloodline, and he ordered that child to abdicate. That requires a kind of coldness most people cannot imagine. It also requires a kind of decisiveness most people will never have. But to understand why he did it, you first need to understand the world he was living in. Yang Zhen was Han Chinese. His daughter had married into the Northern Zhou imperial family, a political alliance that was common in that era, but one that placed Yan Zhen in an extraordinarily dangerous position. As the empress's father, he had become the most powerful non-royal figure in an empire that was not his own, and the Senbei nobility despised him for it. In their eyes, a Han Chinese outsider had used his daughter's marriage to place himself at the very center of their empire. This was not just a political threat to them, it was an insult. When the emperor died, Yang Zhen became regent. The Yuan royal family immediately raised armies to destroy him. One after another, 5 royal princes launched rebellions. So the choice Yang Zhen faced was not really about ambition. It was about survival. If he didn't move first, he wouldn't get a second chance. But there was something deeper driving him too. Imagine growing up in Europe knowing that the Roman Empire had once unified the entire continent, and watching the land around you still fractured, still bleeding, century after century, with no end in sight. That was what it meant to be an educated person in 6th century China. The Han Dynasty was not distant legend. It was preserved in every book, recited by every generation of scholars, held up as living proof that unity was possible, because it had existed once before. For nearly 300 years, no one had been able to rebuild it. Yang Zhen believed he was the one who finally could. That kind of certainty is rare. It is also dangerous, because it makes a person capable of extraordinary things, and capable of crossing lines that ordinary people would never cross, including taking a throne from his own grandson. After Yang Zhen took power, his wife Empress Dugu governed almost as his equal. Historical records called them the two sages. This was not just a marriage, it was a political partnership. Yang Zhen was obsessively hardworking. Historical texts record that he processed state affairs late into every night, tolerating no slack in himself or others. He unified the legal code, rebuilt the census system, reorganized taxation, stripped aristocratic families of their privileges. He insisted that officials serve through institutions rather than family connections. He didn't just lay the foundation for the examination system, he built it. The Tang simply inherited and expanded what he had created. In an age dominated by noble clans, this was a radical revolution in power. The machinery of the state was rebuilt from the ground up. Then his gaze turned south. In the year 589, Sui forces crossed the Yangtze River. The southern Zhen dynasty was unprepared. Its last emperor was famous for poetry, music, and luxury. According to historical accounts, when Sui troops entered the capital, he was still drinking with his favorite concubines. Resistance collapsed quickly. 3 centuries of division ended in a single campaign. Yang Zhen had accomplished in less than a decade what no one had managed in 300 years. But this was only the first half of the story, because what came next, no one could have predicted. Real problem was Yang Zhen's successor. his second son, Yang Guang. Before becoming crown prince, Yang Guang performed humility for years. His older brother, Yang Yong, lived openly and lavishly. Yang Guang, he dressed simply, spoke carefully, made sure his father witnessed every sacrifice he made. The performance worked. Yang Yong was stripped of his title. Yang Guang became crown prince. But the moment Yang Zhen died, the performance was over. Years of restraint suddenly had no purpose. The real Yang Guang finally had room to breathe. And the real Yang Guang was someone no one had been allowed to see. The empire he inherited was stable, population was recovering, the treasury was full, but stability was not enough for him. His father had unified China. His father had rebuilt its institutions. His father had accomplished what no one had managed in 300 years. So what was left for him? That question became the most expensive question in the history of the dynasty. He wanted greatness, so he launched the Grand Canal project. This was not a simple waterway. It linked the Yellow River Basin with the Yangtze Basin, connecting the political north with the economic south. Grain could flow north in massive quantities. Armies could move rapidly across regions. The empire became physically connected in a way it had never been before. Strategically, it was brilliant, but it required millions of laborers. Farmers were conscripted, families separated, fields left untended. Many died on the construction sites. Many more died on the journey home. And before the country could recover, he made his next decision. He would conquer Galgo-Li. Galgo-Li was a powerful kingdom to the northeast, long a rival to Chinese states. To Yang Guang, conquering it would do two things. It would secure the frontier, and it would bring him something his father never had: military glory. The first campaign, 1,113,000 soldiers. Let that number settle for a moment. 1,113,000 men marched out. When the survivors came back, historians recorded the number 2,700. Out of more than 1,000,000 men, 2,700 returned. This was not just a military defeat. This was a national psychological trauma. The rational choice was to stop. But Yang Guang had already invested too much. Lives, resources, reputation. Admitting failure meant admitting all of it had been wasted. So he continued. A second campaign. A third. Psychologists call this the sunk cost fallacy. When a person has already invested too much, stopping feels more painful than continuing. Not because continuing makes sense, but because stopping means admitting that everything before it meant nothing. Yang Guang was not the first leader to fall into this trap. He would not be the last. At the same time, another psychological force was quietly at work: the corruption of power. Research tells us that power systematically reduces a person's ability to feel the suffering of others. Yang Guang was not born cold. Before he took the throne, he had performed perfect humility for years, which means he fully understood human emotion. But power changed him. He no longer needed to perform, no longer needed to care about anyone else's feelings. In his world, the deaths of 1,000,000 men had become a number on a report. Rebellions broke out across the empire, local strongmen seized power, the imperial machine began to fall apart. At the end, Yang Guang was in Jiangdu, that is modern-day Yanzhou. He had built a palace there, far from the chaos of the north. One morning, he stood before a mirror for a long time. Then he said, "I have a fine head. Who will come to cut it?" He knew what was coming. He just didn't know how to stop it. Shortly after, his own palace guards strangled him. The man who had sent 1,000,000 soldiers to their deaths died alone in a borrowed palace at the hands of the people who were supposed to protect him. Now bring this into the present. Imagine a company that has just finished a painful restructuring. Finances are finally stable. Teams are just beginning to trust each other again. Then a new CEO arrives and says, "Now we will do 3 great things at once. Expand into new markets, build a massive new headquarters, acquire a foreign competitor." On paper, these plans are brilliant. In the long run, they may even be correct. But the company is not ready. cash flow tightens, employees start leaving, morale collapses. In the end, the company does not die because of its rivals. It dies because of its own ambition. That was the Sui Dynasty. Not too weak, just too much, too fast. The Sui lasted 37 years. Guang died at the hands of his own guards. But his Grand Canal still exists today. His examination system became the foundation of Chinese governance for 13 centuries. The Tang Dynasty, which many historians consider the most glorious era in Chinese history, was built entirely on what the Sui had created. History remembered him as a tyrant, but the glory of the Tang was constructed on his foundation. Some men are remembered for what they built. Guang is remembered for how he fell. But without him, there would have been nothing left to inherit.